I knew it was over the moment Elise gave me that PR smile, the kind she learned from her executive presence course. Bright enough to smooth any fury, fake enough that no one could ever trust it. This is just part of the restructuring process, she said, her voice even and polished, like she was reading a quarterly report. We need to optimize the team before the IPO. Nothing personal, Nora. Nothing personal. Coming from her, it sounded like a birthday wish no one really wanted to say. I sat there in the glass room on the 17th floor, surrounded by faces bent over their laptops, all pretending to be busy. A young engineer I once mentored adjusted his glasses nervously, avoiding my eyes. The silence had weight. It pulled the air down until I could hear my own heartbeat. Elise went on. Your role will be transitioned to an independent research consultant. You'll no longer be part of the executive operations team. We hope you understand this is the best direction for both sides. Then she smiled softly and pushed a BioVeritas document across the table. The way she slid it, like a restaurant check, almost made me laugh. I used to know how the light hit this room best in the morning, when the sun filtered through the etched glass logo that read, "Innovation starts here." Now that same light only exposed the dust on the chair handles and the dried coffee stains on the table, remnants of other urgent meetings where someone else had been erased from the list. I said nothing. They always expect someone to argue, or at least ask why. But I'd learned how people look away when truth enters the room. I just looked at Elise, then at the frame photo on the wall. Our research team, 8 of us in white lab coats, smiles blurred by glare. 5 of them I had recruited myself. One of them, now sitting beside Elise, was the new team lead. He avoided my gaze again. Elise closed her laptop, tilted her head slightly, her voice shifting into that gentle, empathetic tone. Nora, you've been an essential part of this journey. But in this new phase, we need agility. You know how it is. The market doesn't wait. I blinked slowly. Thank you. I guess I won't either. Another silence. My words hit the table like a tiny pin. Elise raised an eyebrow but kept her smile. I hope we can still collaborate in the future. Depends, I said, closing my notebook. On who keeps the lab keys. I packed my things. No one said a word. As I stepped out of the room, the sound of keyboards started again. Soft, rhythmic, like a drizzle, the familiar sound of pretending to work. An old colleague passed by, avoiding my eyes, whispering good luck just loud enough for only me to hear. I nodded. Down the hall, the small lavender pot I'd kept by the window had been knocked over. Soil scattered across the floor, water bleeding into a memo that read, "Welcome the new VP of Commercial Strategy." I stopped for a second. No one picked it up. Neither did I. The only thing I kept was the faded label on the pot, Dr. Nora E. Blake, Principal Biochemist. I folded it and slipped it into my pocket, like a certificate no one cared about anymore. Before leaving the building, I stopped in the lobby. The LED screen was looping the corporate video, Bio Veritas, Where Science Meets Market. In the clip, Elise stood before a white backdrop saying, "We build the future on trust and innovation." I watched her image for 7 seconds, then let out a quiet laugh. The kind no one hears, the kind that lives in your throat when everything's already too clear. The receptionist gave me a puzzled look. I nodded politely, placed my badge on the counter, and walked out. Boston that morning smelled like wet metal from last night's rain, mixed with coffee smoke from the corner cafe. I pulled my coat tighter, the chill slipping through the sleeves of a white lab coat that wasn't ready to be hung up yet. I walked 3 blocks to the cafe I always went to when I needed to clear my head. The door chimed as I stepped in. "Dr. Blake? Black coffee, as usual?" the barista asked warmly. I nodded. No one here knew I'd just lost the job I'd held for 14 years. They didn't need to. In Boston, people respect silence, especially the kind that belongs to those who no longer need to prove anything. I sat in my usual corner at the old wooden table with the carving N+B 2010. A stupid little thing Elise and I did when we thought we'd change the world with peptides. The world changed. We didn't. The only difference is Elise learned how to smile through every meeting, and I learned how to stay silent through every firing. I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the tiny swirls fade into stillness. There's a strange calm that comes after you lose everything, not because you have nothing left to fear, but because you realize everything you feared has already happened. On the table, I placed my old business card beside the coffee receipt, embossed silver letters, Dr. Nora Blake, Chief Biochemist. I ran my finger over each letter, then folded it in half. No bitterness, no panic. Just a single clear thought. They forgot something. From outside, someone's voice drifted in. Did you hear? They're changing the company logo this week. I looked up. Changing a logo. Easy enough. Changing the company's DNA, the one I wrote, peptide by peptide, that will be harder than they think. I stood, left a tip, and walked out. The Boston sun was breaking through. I took a deep breath. No tragedy, no tears, just a quiet truth waiting to be triggered. Respect doesn't disappear because of conflict. It dissolves when everyone chooses silence. I've always hated the way afternoon light cuts through thin curtains. It makes the apartment look like an unfinished photograph, gray, still, and too real. My kitchen table, oak, old, with a burn mark from the time I forgot to turn off the kettle, is now covered in papers. Fragments of a past folded neatly into a cardboard box next to a Pilot G2 pen, long dried out. On my laptop screen, a photo fills the frame. Me and Elise, 14 years ago, at a cafe in North End. She's laughing, holding up a page crowded with peptide chains. I'm leaning over, hair in a bun, fingers stained with black marker. The picture's a little blurry, sunlight slicing through the window behind us. On the wall is a handwritten paper menu, the one above the counter where we used to order the cheapest lattes in the city. Back then, we didn't have a lab, no office, just that cafe, two old Dell laptops, and a naive faith that honest science could outlast the market. I remember how Elise used to type my name in every email to angel investors. Dr. Blake is the foundation. She's the real scientist. I'm just the storyteller, she'd say, sipping her cappuccino with a wide grin. And I believed her, not because I was naive, but because back then, we were still real people, not titles. Then the funding came, and it changed the sound of her laugh. The first person they hired was a financial advisor, the second, a branding expert. By the time they brought in a third, a patent lawyer from Palo Alto, I realized no one remembered who wrote the first peptide sequence. At one of the first meetings after the seed round, Elise said, "You should focus on the science. I'll handle the legal side, okay?" I nodded. I was tracking a new molecule reacting with antibodies in the simulation and honestly didn't want to argue about paperwork. A week later, I was invited to shift into the role of senior scientific advisor. It's just to look better on the profile, Elise said, so the valuation team sees academic credibility. But you're still a co-founder. In my heart, you always will be. In my heart. I used to think hearts couldn't be diluted until I learned feelings don't have identifiers in legal documents. The patent transfer file still sits in the Google Drive folder called Pending Signatures Post-Funding. It was never signed, and I was never asked again. I spread the files across the table. The carbon papers yellowed, the blue ink faded. The title reads, Provisional Patent Filing 2011, filed by Nora Blake, to be assigned to BioVeritas Inc., pending formal transfer. Next to it, a note in my handwriting. Transfer after Series B funding, waiting for Elise's final confirmation. Series B came and went. Then C, D, and now an $800 million IPO plan. Elise's final confirmation never arrived. I'm not angry. Truly. I don't have the energy to stay mad for a decade over something someone chose to forget. I'm just tired, like a body discovering an old cut only when it starts bleeding underneath. I pick up a pen and date the document. Strangely, my old handwriting looks stronger than it does now. Maybe back then I believed in more things. Maybe I believed Elise meant it. I remember the first time Elise called me sis. She was an MBA intern at the university lab where I taught, a bright-eyed student who talked fast and carried a red notebook everywhere. I want to learn science from someone who doesn't just teach it, but makes it, she said. I took her in, even though there were 4 better candidates. I've made plenty of wrong choices in my life. Staying when I should have left. Staying quiet when I should have hit reply all. Believing that people would remember the contribution without a name on the list. But there's one thing I did right, just one. I never signed the patent transfer. Not because I saw this coming, but because I forgot. I forgot that the value of work doesn't automatically shift from the creator to the storyteller. Forgot that without a signature, the law doesn't recognize good intentions. Forgot that one day, someone might stand on a stage and call your creation a breakthrough without ever saying your name. Forgot, but now I remember. I stack the files neatly in a paper tray, oldest to newest. At the bottom, an email from 2012's. Hey, let's file it under your name for now. After the IPO, I'll transfer it back. Remind me, okay? I never did. At the top, the HR email from yesterday. Nora, per leadership's restructuring directive, your role will transition next week. We're happy to support your offboarding process if needed. Between those two messages lies 12 years of silence. And I lived inside that silence, working, coding, testing, debugging biology, believing that value would prove itself over time, but not anymore. Value needs a signature, a code, a witness. I pick up my phone and open an old contact list. A name I haven't called in 4 years. Jonathan Price, IP attorney, once my colleague on an NIH research review board. I type, John, I need to verify a patent file. Provisional, transfer unsigned. When are you free? Less than 2 minutes later, 3 dots appear. If it's unsigned, the rights are still yours. Send it over. I push my laptop toward the light and start scanning. No shaking, no anger, just one steady thought. If they've ignored this name long enough, I'll make sure it becomes the one they can't ignore again. It took me almost 3 hours to find the old file box. It was buried in the steel cabinet under the bookshelf, hidden beneath yellowed issues of Nature and a 2013 copy of the Harvard Review of Biotech Ethics, an article I once promised to reread but never did. The label on the box read, Walsh, Legal Advisory, 2011. That name stopped me. Michael Walsh, an old classmate, the one who taught me how to treat paperwork the way we treated experiments. Meticulous, documented, replicated, and with an escape route. He died 3 years ago of pancreatic cancer at 49. During our last call, he joked, if you still haven't signed the transfer, you might just end up winning in the end. I laughed then, thinking he was teasing. I'm not laughing now. I opened the box. Inside was a yellow envelope, Michael's faint blue signature across the flap, and a single note, Clause 931C, just in case. Don't lose it. I sat down. Afternoon light slanted across the table, spilling over the beige folder. As I turned the pages, the smell of old paper and ink filled the room, like opening the door to a sealed chamber untouched for more than a decade. Patent application. Provisional patent number 1184 PR. The first pages were dense with the kind of language only I ever found beautiful. Peptide mapping algorithm, cross-link folding sequence, proteomic encryption chain. That was my work. Those words were the DNA of my memory. But on page 7, a small line of text made my heart skip. Clause 9.3.1c. In the absence of payment and formal assignment within 10 years from the provisional filing date, the ownership shall not transfer automatically and shall remain with the original inventor. I read it 3 times, no mistake. It wasn't just a minor clause, it was a gate, the only door left open after everyone else had locked theirs. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling stained with old watermarks. Michael's voice echoed clearly than ever, never sign if they're not clear. Back then, 2011, we were sitting in a small bar in Cambridge, an oak table under dim yellow light, like a late-night lab session. I told him about the new startup, about Elise, the sharp MBA student who believed the world needed translators to turn science into investor language. Michael laughed and poured another beer. Sounds thrilling. But remember this, Nora. They'll talk about vision. You keep the evidence. They can change the logo, but you keep the clause. I wrote that sentence on the folder's cover. The ink has faded, but the meaning hasn't. I turned on my laptop and logged into the USPTO private pair portal. The interface hadn't changed since 2000, flat, gray, outdated, but to me, it was a gate to a world where every word had a timestamp. I entered the file number. The system confirmed. Provisional patent filed August 14th, 2011. Status: pending assignment. No recorded transfer of ownership. I sat still, palms damp. No transfer, no payment. That meant the clause still lived. 14 years later, and they never noticed. I checked the date, April 3rd. BioVeritas was scheduled to announce its IPO on April 14th, exactly 11 days. I'm not someone who chases drama. Years in the lab taught me that everything must be verified, every result duplicated. But when a number leaps out from a sea of data like destiny, your pulse races no matter how much logic you've trained yourself to trust. I sipped cold coffee. A neighbor's dog barked. A train horn echoed somewhere far off. Boston night pressed against the windows, and in my fifth-floor apartment, I sat alone with a clause no one else in the world had noticed. I reopened one of Michael's old emails. Subject line unchanged. Patent advisory, for your eyes only. At the bottom, a note I'd ignored for years. If they ever forget to formalize it, and if you ever walk away, file a notice of ownership reversion. It's not revenge, it's insurance. I smiled faintly. He always made things sound lighter than they were. I touched the screen. The text blurred slightly. Insurance, I whispered. But this wasn't protection. It was definition. Proof of who truly owned what. I pulled my laptop closer and opened a spreadsheet. Column 1, IPO timeline. Column 2, filing window. Column 3, verification steps. I began listing milestones. Day 1, verify the patent's active status. Day 2, draft the ownership affirmation notice. Day 3 to 5, submit via USPTO e-file. Day 6 to 10, await confirmation. Day 11, BioVeritas IPO. Each step is highlighted in pale blue, the same color as the nitrile gloves I used in the lab. I paused, inhaling slowly. Each cell in the spreadsheet felt like a heartbeat. On the bookshelf, the old photo of BioVeritas's founding team still stood, me, Elise, and two young engineers. My eyes back then were bright, trusting, unguarded. I pulled the photo from its frame and placed it in the file box. It wasn't a memory anymore, it was evidence, proof of the moment before silence became strategy. I wrote a note and stuck it to the fridge. Not revenge, verification. Next to it, I set down a blue Pilot fountain pen, the one Michael gave me in 2010, engraved with tiny letters. Precision protects. Tonight, it sounded like a warning from the past. I turned on the desk lamp. Golden light pooled over the paper-covered table. Outside, wind hissed through the window frame, carrying the salty trace of the Charles River. I opened a new tab and searched for Notice of Ownership Reversion, Form 207B. 7 pages long. I started filling it out. My hand didn't shake. My focus was sharp. I'd spent half my life decoding peptides. Now I was decoding another kind of system, one that thought it owned me. At the final line, effective date of potential transfer, I hesitated for a moment, then typed, pending, no transfer executed as of 04/03/2025. Clicked, save draft. The message blinked. Document. Saved successfully. A soft click echoed in the room. It sounded like a lock sliding into place, not trapping me in the past, but sealing what was mine. I closed the laptop and looked at the clock. 11:47 p.m. Streetlights bled through the curtains, tracing a faint wave across the wall, like the rhythm of a peptide chain, looping, connecting, alive. I smiled. 11 days left. Enough time for one small clause to become a loud reminder. Not everyone holding the microphone is the one who wrote the song. No farewell email, no cheerful LinkedIn post about learning so much along the way, no goodbye coffee, no polite message saying thank you for the journey. I didn't need to make noise. I just needed precision. That morning, Boston was wrapped in soft sunlight. I sat in the kitchen wearing an old sweatshirt, hair tied up, hands around a cup of coffee, while the laptop booted up. The apartment was quiet, like a clinical trial morning. Everything was prepared to be exact. No rush, no errors. The ownership reversion form was already filled out from the night before. The text on the Notice of Ownership Reversion, Form 207B, appeared sharp on the white screen. No colors, no logos, no borders. Each sentence felt like a steady tap on the scales of justice. I, Nora Blake, confirm that no payment or formal transfer of ownership has been executed as of April 3, 2025. For provisional patent number 1N84PR. Below it, filed under Clause 9.3.1c, per Council guidance. Supporting documentation attached. I opened the drawer and pulled out the notarized copy, the red seal from Walsh and Finch, still crisp and clear. Michael once said, "If you ever need that seal, it means they've gone too far." I scanned the page in high resolution and attached it to the main file. The clock on the wall read 9:41 a.m. Final check. Every field is complete. Digital signature verified under active USPTO ID. No errors. I clicked Submit. The screen blinked twice, then displayed the familiar line. Your submission has been received. Tracking number 8C7F-PRE9021. Expected processing 24-48 business hours. Status in reversion review. And that was it. I stood and filled the kettle. The water boiled softly, blending with the sound of the wind through the window. On the sill, the lavender pot leaned toward the light. When I first brought it home, it was nearly dead, burnt leaves, half-rotten roots. But I saved it. Not with prayers, but with new soil, pH tests, steady watering, and patience. I never hoped for it to bloom, only to live in the direction it wanted, like me, this morning. Somewhere in the city, BioVeritas was busy preparing for IPO day. Slides, investor follow-ups, valuation sheets, roadshow decks. No one there knew that. Right now, the name on the patent ownership record had just changed. From BioVeritas Inc., Nora Blake. No lawsuit, no threats. Just a form, a clause, a silent person. I opened LinkedIn, not to post, just to look. Elise had posted 17 hours ago. Innovation isn't just about invention, it's about owning the moment. A photo below it, her standing beside the BioVeritas sign, holding a whiteboard that read 800 miles strong. I looked for a second, then scrolled past. No anger, just amusement. They think they own the moment, but I'm the one who owns the principle behind it. My phone buzzed with a call from the company's old internal line. I let it ring out. If they wanted to ask about knowledge transfer, they'd have to be specific. What knowledge? The proprietary kind or just experience? I no longer owed them instructions on how to use what they once thought was theirs. I opened a new tab and checked the public patent portal. Status: pending public update within 24-48 AHRs. I knew. No need to refresh. All I had to do was wait. While they drafted their press releases for investors, I brewed a pot of tea, not coffee. Today called for stillness. In science, there's a concept called silent value. It's the kind of element that doesn't spark breakthroughs, but keeps the entire system from collapsing. I used to think that was me, the foundation keeper, the one who didn't need the spotlight. Now I know. Silence doesn't mean invisible, and sometimes, silence is how you make an entire system listen. I stepped out onto the balcony, tea in hand, and looked down at the street. To the right was the cafe where we once sketched the first peptide map. The place where Elise once promised, "When this is all done, your name will still be there." My name wasn't there, not on the banner, not in the pitch deck, but now it's somewhere they can't erase, in a government record. I sat down, opened my notebook, and wrote my first line in years meant just for me. April 4th, 2025. I didn't strike back, I just reclaimed my fingerprint. I wasn't at the convention center. No one sent me an invite. No one remembered the name Nora Blake when the guest list was printed from marketing's CRM system. But I still knew everything that was happening. From my old laptop, watching the public live stream link on the landing page, biovalink.live/demo 2025. On the screen, white letters glowed against a blue LED backdrop. Next Gen Peptide Mapping. Proprietary IP. Built for the future. The stage was shaped like an RNA chain sketch, lights flickering in rhythmic pulses like a digital heartbeat. And in the center, Elise Brennan walked out. In a charcoal blazer, beige heels, hair in soft curls, every inch the tech executive. She began with a smile. Always that smile, trained through countless coaching sessions and too many investor pitches. Today, we're proud to introduce BioVeritas's core technology, a next-generation peptide mapping platform, exclusive, innovative, and ready for global commercialization. I sat up straight. The next sentence made my palms go cold. The folding sequence algorithm has been optimized to a deviation rate under 0.5%, built upon the internal framework we call the Blake chain to honor the one who laid the foundation. My lips pressed together, not angry, just hollow. Blake chain. They used my name to brand what they claimed to own. Elise kept going, voice bright and triumphant. We're proud to have taken Blake chain from idea to innovation, from concept to intellectual property. This is the legacy of BioVeritas. Legacy. I hit record. Timestamp 10:06 a.m. April 14th, 2025. Location: Boston Convention Center. Public claim of ownership: no attribution, no license, no acknowledgement of reversion. Applause filled the hall. An Astrotech director nodded. A Gilead rep scribbled notes. No one knew that every phrase Elise just used, proprietary IP, built in-house, original to BioVeritas, was legally false. I filed the reversion with the USPTO 10 days ago. The system updated 48 hours ago, but no one at BioVeritas checked because she won't fight back, right? I kept recording. Next slide. Peptide encryption map v3.2. The interface looked almost identical to the version I'd sketched by hand on the whiteboard back in 2014. I remembered that day because I was wearing red shoes with slippery soles, nearly fell, and Elise laughed. You should patent that fall. The fall never happened, but the patent did. She ended her presentation with a new slogan: BioVeritas, not just science. Ownership. I laughed quietly. The mic probably didn't catch it. The demo moved on to the technical session. Engineers explained how the Blake chain was being used for early mutation detection. I did what I'd always done. Paused the video, took screenshots, saved everything to a folder labeled Evidence, Willful Infringement. Then I opened Jonathan's email from last night. My IP attorney, now. Nora, per the USPTO update, the ownership for patent number 184 PR officially transferred to you on April 12th. The system validated the reversion clause under 9.3.1c. If they continue using it without permission, that's level 2 infringement, intentional, documented, and monetized. If they demo it publicly, it escalates to willful infringement, triple damages. I kept the email open, eyes on the live stream. Elise stood beside the CTO, arms crossed, smiling like she was about to sign with NASA. They didn't know. They didn't see. They thought I had stepped back. But I'd rewritten the rules. I didn't need the spotlight. I didn't need to stand on stage and shout, I made that. All I needed was proof that they were using something they didn't own. At the end of the demo, Elise raised her hand to the crowd. Thank you for believing in us. We are BioVeritas, and the future is ours. I hit stop recording. The clock read 11:28 a.m. I opened the evidence folder. saved the footage, screenshots, and transcript excerpts, zipped the file, sent it to Jonathan. Subject: public claim, no license. Body: let's prepare. Then I stepped out onto the balcony. The lavender pot still leaned toward the light, and I didn't need to lean anywhere, because from now on, the light would know exactly where to find me. I wasn't there. I only found out because someone sent the wrong email. An intern from the legal department, Adam or maybe Aaron, I can't remember, emailed me instead of Elise. The first line read, "Dr. Blake, are you aware that your name is still listed as the patent owner on the USPTO site?" I kept rereading it while the kettle clicked and hissed on the stove. I didn't reply. I just stared at the subject line. Ownership discrepancy. Urgent before IPO filing. I could picture the scene perfectly. The Bio Veritas legal office, bright white lights, papers scattered across the table. The whole team is combing through documents for the official IPO submission. Over 800 pages, each filled with lines about intellectual property holdings. Some intern, probably a senior from Harvard Law, was assigned to verify the patent numbers for the core IP assets. He opened his browser, typed 1184 PR, and scrolled to Owner. And there it was. Not BioVeritas Inc. Owner, Dr. Nora E. Blake. Effective date, April 12th, 2025. I could imagine the moment. Silence thick enough to cut through. The cursor is frozen. No one believed what they were seeing. A former colleague told me later that the room stayed silent for 45 seconds. Then chaos. Papers hitting the floor. Chairs scraping. Someone shouting, "This must be an error." Elise was called down immediately. She walked in, heels striking like warning drums. "Show me," she said, still confident. The intern turned the monitor. The USPTO.gov logo glowed in the corner, timestamp clear and unforgiving. Elise squinted, reading each line slowly. Every word dropped like a stone into water. Reversion confirmed under Clause 9.31c. Registered owner, Dr. Nora E. Blake. "No," she whispered. "It can't be. The system must be wrong." The head counsel, a silver-haired man, removed his glasses, voice low. "No glitch, Elise. This is an authenticated record. Notarized, verified. If this is accurate, the core patent no longer belongs to us." She stood there, frozen. "You're telling me the person we removed 10 days ago now owns the foundation of an $800 million company?" He nodded. No one laughed. She ordered another check. A young paralegal opened the email from the USPTO electronic filing system. Attached was the PDF. Notice of ownership reversion, approved. 1.7 megabytes. First page, digital signature, Nora E. Blake. Below it, timestamp to the minute. Filed April 4th, 2025, approved. April 12th, 2025, effective immediately. I was told Elise sank into a chair. She stared at the printout, then around the room. Someone murmured, "We can negotiate this," but the voice faded when they remembered the demo. The public demo, the one who used my technology on stage. Intentional, documented, recorded, willful infringement, 3 words that drain the color from any lawyer's face. That afternoon, Elise called me. 3 rings. I didn't pick up. She called again. Second time. Third. On the 4th, I listened to the voicemail. Her voice trembled, wrapped in forced calm. "Nora, we need to talk. There seems to be a mix-up in the records. I think someone filed the wrong form, or it could be a system glitch. We can resolve this quietly. I know you. You're not someone who wants to make a scene." I stopped the message there, not out of anger, but because I didn't want to break the silence she had just built for herself. I opened my laptop and typed a single clear sentence. Subject: ownership clarification, body. "You never finished the paperwork, but I finished mine. NB." Then I hit send. No extras, No apology, no exclamation marks. An hour later, a message came from a friend still in the tech team. Elise's face, pale as lab glass. Boards in emergency session. Everyone's whispering your name. I looked out the window. Late afternoon in Boston. Sunlight slanted across the Bio Veritas tower across the river. The 17th floor windows glowed faint gold. The same room I once sat in. Now, probably full of panic. Soon after, the first leak appeared. A small biotech blog posted, "Ownership discrepancy surfaces in Bio Veritas patent filing ahead of IPO." Short article, no details yet. Source cited as USPTO document leak. But I knew. In a few hours, it would spread like a chain reaction. Elise called again, a fifth time. I let it ring. Part of me wanted to hear her explain. Another part didn't. Because I understood, the worst pain isn't losing ownership. It's realizing you never truly had it. That night, Jonathan called, my IP lawyer. "Nora, they'll try to negotiate, but you hold the advantage. The demo footage covers every instance of infringement. We don't need threats, just silence. Let them walk into the procedure." I asked, "Do they know yet?" He chuckled softly. "Trust me, they know. They filed an amendment of ownership request. Denied in 12 minutes. System returned. Ownership change not authorized." I opened my sent folder and reread the line I'd written to Elise. It wasn't hatred, it wasn't revenge, it was simply the last line in the equation of justice. "You never finished the paperwork, but I finished mine. They used to say I couldn't adapt, that I was too academic, too rigid, too naive about the market, but in that moment, I understood. Principle is the one thing the market can't buy." I turned off the kitchen light and stepped onto the balcony. Below, the city kept moving. No one was aware that an $800 million company had just lost its foundation because of a forgotten clause. On the windowsill, the lavender leaned toward the light. I poured a bit of water, slow and steady. That was the sound of real power, not loud, not threatening, just quiet, steady, and irreversible. I didn't lose sleep that night, not because I didn't care, but because I'd already lost enough sleep over things that weren't worth it. When people call it revenge, they've clearly never worked in a lab. In science, there's no revenge, only error correction. And this time, the error was in the name of the owner. The next morning, I made black coffee. It keeps my rhythm, not for the caffeine, but because it's the one habit no one has ever restructured. The laptop was already open, Gmail glowing in the dim morning light. I typed the addresses. 2, Bio Veritas Executive Board, CC. Bio Veritas Legal Department. Subject, terms for continued use of patent, number 1884PR. No greeting, no preamble. Just 3 bullet points, like a chemical formula, clear, exact, no interpretation. License fee, $18 million upfront, plus 10% annual royalties. Public acknowledgement of authorship. All official documents, press releases, and investor materials must include technology originally developed by Dr. Nora Blake. Elise Brennan's resignation. I reread each line, made no edits, short, direct, weighted, no negotiation, no threats, no citations. Just a factual notice, like reporting a positive test result. No explanation needed. The data speaks for itself. I added one final line. This isn't revenge, it's a correction of authorship. Then I typed my name, Nora Blake. No signature mark, no italics, just a name. A name once erased from every document, now back where it belonged. I hit send. No racing pulse, no shaking hands, just a quiet click, soft as setting a pipette into a reference vial. But knowing the reaction about to start couldn't be reversed. I closed the laptop. The latch made a low, steady sound. On the table, the lavender pot had bloomed with 2 new pale purple flowers. I watched them for a while. Some victories don't need fireworks, just proof that something once withered has learned how to live again. 15 minutes later, the phone buzzed. Not calls, just a stream of auto replies. Out of office, preparing IPO documentation. Please contact Elise Brennan for all patent-related inquiries. Received. Will review internally. I smiled. They still didn't understand. They no longer had the right to review anything. The only choice they had now was to comply or disappear from the legal map. By noon, Jonathan called. You sent the email? Yes. No copy for me? No need. Just prepare the paperwork when they reply. He paused, then laughed. That's so you. No big speeches, but enough precision to make them sweat. I smiled. I just spoke in the language they understand best, the language of contracts. 3:07 p.m. A text appeared from an unknown number. Can we talk, Nora? The sender, Elise. I read it, didn't open it. Not because I was angry, but because I had no reason left to talk. Conversation only matters when both people still share the same reality. She didn't. Her reality was built on someone else's work. That afternoon, light rain fell over Boston. I sat by the window, listening to drops hit the metal frame. I replayed the demo video, the part where Elise said, Bio Veritas, not just science, ownership. I pressed pause. The frame froze on her face, half a smile, blue LED light reflected across her cheek. A beautiful image. If you didn't know the timestamp, proved it false. Proof doesn't need anger, just timing. 6:12 p.m. An email arrived. From Bio Veritas Legal Department. Subject, Terms for continued use. Body. Dr. Blake, the board requests a meeting tomorrow to discuss terms. Please confirm availability. I didn't reply right away. I poured another cup of tea and reread my own email. 3 bullet points. No mistakes, no extras, no please, no regards. I knew they'd react like this. When people live by taking, the first time they meet a real boundary, they don't get angry. They get scared. The clock ticked softly, each sound steady and sure. Every tick a reminder. I'd waited 12 years for this, not to take revenge, but to correct the label on what I created. Night fell. My phone lit up again. A message from Jonathan. If they agree, remember this. When they call it revenge, just smile. They don't understand the difference between revenge and realignment. I wrote back, realignment is just physics. What's displaced always finds its balance. I drew the curtains. The city outside still glowed, glass towers, reflecting light like overlapping DNA strands. I thought of the years I'd been cropped out of team photos, deleted from files, cut out of meetings. No regret, just calm, because in the end, every deviation finds its rightful position. I set down the teapot, opened my notebook, and wrote a few lines. April 15th, 2025. They once called me too rigid. Maybe principle is the only thing that can't be taken public. Then I smiled, soft, almost under my breath. Not revenge, just correction. They sent the invitation on a Tuesday morning, exactly at 8:03, an email from the Bio Veritas board. The subject line was simple, reinstatement proposal. I didn't open it right away. I sat in the kitchen, hands wrapped around my mug of black coffee, the steam still faintly rising. Spring light slipped through the blinds and brushed across the wooden table where the lavender pot was in full bloom. That plant had once fallen, withered, been forgotten, just like me. Now it leaned toward the light, strong, needing no applause. I thought maybe that's what they never understood. Not everyone who leaves wants to return. When I finally opened the email, the tone was as sweet as every PR statement they'd ever written. We would be honored to welcome you back as Honorary Director of Science. Your presence would inspire confidence among investors, employees, and the scientific community. I smiled, not out of mockery, but with the quiet understanding of someone who once belonged there and no longer does. I replied in 4 lines, "Thank you. I won't be returning. I believe good science should stand on its own, without its founder holding it up." Then I hit send. No second thoughts. The first royalty payment arrived 3 weeks later, a sum most people would call life-changing. I didn't buy a new car or move into a penthouse. I transferred 40% into a new account named STEM for Quiet Women Fund. I didn't want it to be a foundation. No logo, no gala, no press release, just a small scholarship sent directly to young women in science whose applications often got ignored for lacking self promotion. I knew that feeling. I had been them. I knew the cost of doing the right thing without the right volume. Jonathan, my lawyer, objected at first. You know you could reinvest, start your own company, compete with them, right? I smiled. I don't need to win back the market. I just need to build a place where people don't lose because they stayed quiet. He paused, then said softly, maybe that's the kindest form of revenge. I looked out the window at the lavender swaying gently in the wind and said, no, Jonathan, it's not revenge. It's restoring fairness to something that was once judged by noise. A few weeks later, a major tech magazine reached out for an interview. They wanted to run a feature titled The Woman Who Outsmarted Her Own Company. I read it and laughed. No one outsmarted anyone. I just read the clause. They didn't. I declined the interview, not out of fear, but because I didn't want the truth turned into content. I sent the editor a single line. Thank you, but this story doesn't need a narrator. It's already told itself. Sometimes I still walk past the Bio Veritas building. The 17th floor now has a new sign. Bio Veritas, Science with Integrity. I almost laughed when I saw the word integrity on the glass for the first time. Maybe Elise came up with it. I don't know, and it doesn't matter. I heard she left the company, avoiding the press. A part of me still felt for her, not for what she did, but for what she lost believing success meant owning all the light. Most afternoons, I spend time teaching the first scholarship group, 3 young women, one from Texas, one from Maine, one from Florida. They all speak softly, but their eyes brighten when they talk about their research. One said, I'm not good at presenting, so people usually don't notice me. I smiled and told her, that's okay, real light doesn't need a microphone. She looked at me, surprised, then smiled back. I realized I'd just said what I needed to hear 10 years ago. One afternoon, an industry newspaper sent me a brown envelope. Inside was a printed feature about me, even though I'd declined. The headline read, The Quiet Architect of Bio Veritas. I wasn't angry. I just folded the paper, placed it under the lavender pot, and let the soil draw out its moisture. One day, when I change the soil, it will crumble, like every story eventually turns to dust. May in Boston. The wind sis oft, the sky clear. I stepped onto the balcony, holding a cup of mint tea. The scent of lavender mixed with the tea, clean, quiet, like a perfect pause. For a moment, I thought about everything that led here. Elise, Michael, Jonathan, the long nights in the lab, the data no one saw, the memos no one read. It all led to this simple truth. A woman standing in sunlight, knowing exactly who she is, needing no one's acknowledgement. I leaned down and touched the nearest lavender bloom. The petals were thin, delicate, but strong and fragrant. I smiled and whispered, not to anyone in particular, but to that quiet light inside me. Some people don't need an audience. They just need their names written right. I turned back inside and closed the door. Outside, the sun spread across the glass buildings, shimmering like water. Inside, the scent of lavender filled the room, quiet, steady, and never asking for applause. That year, autumn came early to Boston. The air was crisp, cool, threading through every leaf. I was standing in the courtyard of Lincoln High, where the local science fair was underway. White tablecloths, clusters of laughing students, the scent of new plastic from test tubes, mixed with the sweetness of baked goods from the cafeteria. I was there as a volunteer mentor for a group of 11th grade girls. Their project, enzyme reactions under variable pH conditions. Simple. But to me, it felt like watching a smaller version of where I once began, when everything was still discovery, untouched by stock prices or boardroom polish. Dr. Blake, I think we messed up the solution, said a curly-haired girl, watching the liquid turn cloudy. I bent down and smiled. You didn't mess up. It's just reacting faster than you expected. Chemistry is a bit like people. When conditions are right, everything shows its true nature. The girls laughed, not because they fully understood, but because they felt lighter. Another girl, small, glasses thick as lenses in a microscope, looked up and asked, "You really worked at BioVeritas, right? There's an article about you online." I nodded. "Yes, I used to." "And they said you invented their main technology, didn't you?" I looked at the test tube, slowly shifting color, and said, "I wrote the first line, not in a presentation slide, in a petri dish." She was quiet for a moment, then smiled, as if she understood something unspoken. When they went back to taking temperature readings, I stepped aside. The sound of the fair swelled, laughter, music, teachers calling names. I stood near the window, looking out at the clear sky and falling leaves. On the table, my laptop was open, tracking administrative forms for the scholarship fund. A small notification blinked in the corner of the screen. USPTO notification. Patent record updated. I opened it. The line appeared in clean blue text, neat and undeniable. Owner, Dr. Nora Blake, sole inventor. I sat still for a few seconds. No feeling of triumph, just a calm certainty that everything had finally been placed where it belonged. Elise wrote me a few weeks later. No apology, no excuses. Just one line. I read the update. "You deserved it from the beginning." I didn't reply. Some sentences don't need answers. They've already been answered by the truth. When the fair ended, the students ran over and hugged me. One girl handed me a small bundle of dried lavender tied with a purple ribbon. I asked, "Why lavender?" She smiled. "Because it still smells sweet even after it's dried." I smiled back. "Exactly. And it doesn't need anyone to praise it to keep its scent." I held the sprig and walked out to the field. Afternoon sunlight spread gold across the grass. I thought about Michael, about the long nights in the lab, about Jonathan, and the young women I was mentoring. Each one a small bright dot, forming a quiet, peptide chain, a structure invisible to most, but I knew it was stronger than any spotlight. On my way home, I stopped at the same cafe where everything once began. The same wooden table, the same brick wall. Only now I wasn't drafting grant proposals. I was writing next year's scholarship list. The barista recognized me. "Black coffee as always, Dr. Blake?" I smiled. "Yes, no sugar, no cream." He nodded. "Consistent." "Always," I said, looking out the window. Consistency. The trait I'd been criticized for my whole life. But maybe that was the only strength that carried me through this without losing myself. By the time I got home, the sun was almost gone. I watered the lavender. It had grown tall, full, its scent soft and clean, filling the kitchen. The petals swayed lightly, touched by the last streaks of gold. I stood there quietly. No one left to fight, nothing left to prove. Just one simple truth. I wrote the first line, not in a marketing slide, not in a pitch deck, not in an IPO filing. I wrote it in a petri dish, among the smell of ethanol and the hum of centrifuges when everything was still just an idea, and that no one could ever take away. I picked up my notebook and wrote the final line on the last page. Science doesn't need heroes. It just needs people who keep the record straight. Then I closed the notebook and set it beside the lavender pot. The last light touched its cover, glinting softly against the wall. I exhaled and smiled gently. Some people don't need an audience. They just need their names written right.